You can be great at scheduling, tracking KPIs, and writing flawless project plans. But the moment you're expected to lead people, everything changes. Welcome to the Project Management Masterclass, the show where project leaders are made. This platform exists for one reason. Tools don't deliver projects, people do. That's why the Power Skills Academy was created, to help project professionals master the skills that actually move the needle. Emotional intelligence, communication, collaborative leadership, and strategic thinking. The skills that elevate your influence and make people want to follow your lead. If you ever thought, what am I missing? This is your answer. Visit www.developpowerskills.com. The link is in the description. Now, here's your host, Brittany Wilkins.
Much love and appreciation to our Project Management Masterclass listeners from around the world. Special shout out to our new listeners from Westerly, Rhode Island, Borom, Essex, Cambodia, and Roanoke, Texas. Today's episode is about elevating outcomes with a strategy that goes beyond deadlines and deliverables. So let's be honest here for a moment. Haven't we all been part of projects where the checklist was completed, but stakeholders still weren't really satisfied? I want to share a story with you. I'll be transparent and share about one of my very first assignments in HVAC. I was tasked with leading the transition of our engineering organization from one PPM system to another. I built a master project plan, trained every department, and wrote all the standard operating procedures. So on paper, I delivered the objectives, but the daily feedback told a different story. The system lacked the capabilities and features that stakeholders who were using the system every day actually needed or really wanted to have. So in the beginning, adoption lagged a bit, and myself and others had to really work to get our organization to really embrace change and embrace transitioning to this new system. And I had to ask myself, did project success really mean simply meeting the objectives? Or should success be measured across the entire organization from the top down and the bottom up and across the organization? So that question leads us here. What does project success really mean today? How do you currently define it? And how can we, as project professionals, deliver not just outputs, but really deliver real outcomes? And that's what the M.O.R.E strategy is all about. I touched on this briefly in episode 18 when I discussed PMI's Global Talent Gap Report. I believe it's important to keep reinforcing frameworks and fundamentals, because mastering the craft of project management is a lifelong journey. And right now, I'm applying the M.O.R.E framework in my own projects on how I can leverage this framework to get better outcomes. The M.O.R.E framework, it's a modern code for success. And by the end of this episode, together, I hope we have a new lens for ways that we can lead our projects with purpose, value, and vision. Because that's what it's all about, right? Finding and utilizing the best frameworks, methodologies that fit our current projects, that fit our current project environments, and leading those projects with purpose and, more importantly, clarity. So let's begin by defining success. For many of us, we know traditionally project success has been measured by the triangle, the big three, I call them: time, cost, and scope. If we deliver on the big three, time, cost, and scope, then we are able to really give ourselves that pat on the back. But here's something that research is showing. Here's the reality. Research shows that only about half of projects are considered successful. Around 12% are flat out failures, and the remaining 40% are somewhere in the messy middle. Why is this? Because meeting requirements isn't just enough anymore. The way to think about it is, think of it of this way. Success is when the value is greater than the effort plus the expense. Project success is defined as the value greater than the effort plus expense. The equation really shifts the focus from what we deliver to whether is this project worth it? Was the project worth it? If we're reevaluating, if we're looking backward in time. And when we ask whose opinion matters most in determining success, the research shows it's the customer's perception that matters above all, regardless of what we think. This is powerful because it means no matter how perfect our Gantt chart looks, how pretty our dashboards are, if the customer doesn't feel the value, the project misses the mark. So you may be wondering, okay, how do I deliver value? And how do we deliver it consistently? That's when the M.O.R.E framework comes in. So I'm going to break down each letter. And as I break down each letter, let's think about, okay, how can we apply this in real world scenarios from where we are at today? And again, my intention is not to overwhelm you because there's already a lot of project management frameworks, methodologies, ITTOs. But again, this is just another one to continue to bring to the surface, and so that you have another framework in your tool repository or methodology repository that you can lean on if you feel it's applicable or you're looking for a new way to go about defining project success that delivers. So let's get into the M.O.R.E framework and which each letter means. The M in M.O.R.E stands for managing perceptions. Stakeholders must perceive that our project outputs provide value relative to the investment of resources. So if we think about a software rollout, the IT team might celebrate because the code is clean and the system works. But if the end users find it clunky or unhelpful, the project won't be viewed as a success. Kind of like the story I started with at the beginning of the show. And managing this perceptions means really staying close to stakeholders, asking the hard questions and aligning expectations throughout. The O in M.O.R.E stands for own project success by owning outcomes. Our job just isn't to deliver on requirements. It is to take accountability for those outcomes those requirements were meant to achieve. So just imagine being tasked with building a new training program. Do you think it's enough for us to say, well, I just delivered the modules? Could we ask maybe a better question? Who actually learned from what we delivered? And did their performance improve? So this is really about moving from that compliance mindset, really checking the boxes, to really an ownership mindset. And by owning outcomes, this doesn't mean that you shoulder the burden of the work alone, but you're driving those you're leading in owning these outcomes and leveraging the team who has the talents, the skills, and abilities to really execute this project and have a flawless and successful product launch. The R in M.O.R.E stands for Relentlessly Reassessing Project Parameters. As the famous quote goes, the only constant in life is change. It's inevitable. We know market conditions shift, customer needs evolve. We know customers change their minds all the time, and new technologies continue to appear and emerge. So a project that was viable last year might be really irrelevant today. So the relentless reassessment means continuously checking, is this still valuable? Are we on the right track? Do we need to pivot? And sometimes it's unpopular to be the one in the room, to be asking the question, why are we doing this? Is this still even worth it? What value is this project bringing? Because many of the projects, we're doing them because to various things beyond outside of our control. But it does sometimes require the courage. And it means telling the stakeholders, we need to rethink this. But it's more than this telling stakeholders we need to rethink this. It's proposing another strategy, one that gives them information and making the decision, should we stick with the current plan or should we pivot to what is being proposed and getting that feedback. The E in M.O.R.E stands for expanding perspective. We know projects don't exist in isolation. They affect the broader organization, our communities, and sometimes even the planet. So expanding perspective means asking, how does this fit into the enterprise strategy or organizational strategy? What ripple effects does it have? And what research has shown is that projects that align with social impact and sustainability goals are nearly twice as likely to succeed. And I'm a witness to that as I led 2 sustainability initiatives. And although they were very complex projects, at times you couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Our team was very successful in delivering these projects that impacted the broader organizational strategy for the organization. And not only did we succeed, we were awarded Team of the Year. We received the Chairman's Award as well. So, do your projects have social impact and sustainability goals tied to them? The research has shown that only about 22% of projects actually include social impact in their success criteria. Do you see it as a missed opportunity? It just depends. In many organizations, there's different levels of projects. You have level 1, level 2, level 3. Projects exist for different reasons. And so does every project need to be tied to a social impact and sustainability goal? It just goes back into the value and the outcomes they are aiming to achieve. So with the M.O.R.E framework comes a mindset shift. It's a shift in how we manage perceptions. It's a shift in how we own outcomes. It's a shift in how we continuously improve or relentlessly reassess. It's a shift in how we expand that perspective. But in obtaining value requires us to measure the value. So let's talk about measurement here. As we know, what gets measured gets done, or what gets measured gets managed. but only 30% of projects define success criteria up front. Put a performance system in place in tracking that performance throughout. Many do not. That means that most teams are working without a compass. So if we don't define any type of success criteria beyond the big three, then how do we change that? How can we change that and have a better measurement system? Well, again, you have to define what does success look like and define it early. We have to be explicit about what success looks like beyond the deliverables. Every time I start a new project or I get pulled into the project, and depending on where we are currently at, one of my famous quotes that I always ask the project team is to begin with the end in mind. What does that end look like? What is that outcome? And then to work backwards from there. How are we envisioning this? And we always have to measure consistently. We need to have systems in place that track progress toward outcomes. And we have to track the value of those outcomes, not just the outputs, but whether that if the outputs are leading to impact. Because if we're not measuring, then how are we determining the value? Or is it just the stories and the perceptions that we're creating, but not with a real measurement strategy behind it? Then we're just guessing. But I know sometimes too, people can get hung up and overwhelmed by measurement because measurement is a very broad term. But how I've kind of approached this, because I'm currently leveraging the M.O.R.E framework and kind of measuring where one of my current programs is at today, is just by starting with what I necessarily have. For many of my programs, many of my projects, I have a dashboard, I have a scorecard, I have a project plan. And in looking at my dashboard, I've defined several KPIs that we are tracking progress towards and reporting on those, saying, here's where we were at when I last reported, here's where we are at today. But I've since then of kind of taking a step back and just getting out of the robotic phase of reporting, and really looking and leaning into these KPIs to say, are these really providing value for the outcome we are trying to seek? And from what I have seen and some of the issues and some of the gaps that I see, should many of these KPIs even still be on this dashboard? Are they here just for kind of just filler, not really providing any type of value, or no one's really understanding the number or the progress bars behind it? So it's very important. Just start with where you are and what you have and adapt it from there if you think, and it requires that feedback too, listening to stakeholders. That's why, we do continuous reporting, and to see, is this the value is this the mechanism? Is this the measurement that is helping us to drive that value? So how do we apply the M.O.R.E framework? One methodology can be applied within the project phases, the project lifecycle. So within initiation and planning, you can define that success criteria, align those stakeholder perceptions, and write an outcome-driven charter that considers social impact. And if you don't know where to begin with a charter, I did an episode on developing a project charter for a project success. That may lead you and generate some ideas of how you can begin to put a charter together. Like, what are some key aspects, some key information that is needed in that charter in considering social impact? Then execution. create a performance measurement plan. And you may say, okay, well, what should, you have some measurement plans contain KPIs. You may say, okay, well, if you don't currently have a measurement plan, or if you haven't defined any KPIs, where might you start? Where there was a whole global report on, redefining project success that PMI had rolled out. And within this report, within the research, it had many performance themes and levers that companies utilize to define project success within their organization. So for those of you kind of starting with a blank page or a blank sheet of paper, you can start really from, you utilize that as a baseline and make it your own, get that stakeholder buy-in. And once you kind of get the buy-in on the measurement plan, once you kind of lay out that strategy for this is how we're going to execute it and this is the plan, continue to communicate that progress, communicate the challenges, but also to communicate the solutions to overcome those challenges, then communicate the emerging value. What are the benefits? I think sometimes, we go into projects and, we're communicating progress, but then, we're communicating risks and issues, but let's be sure to, again, we're communicating the value in that, because the more we kind of try to focus on all the challenges and what's not going right, sometimes the value and the benefits get lost. But also too, in many of our plans, as I stated, we know that change will come. And we have to be flexible and adaptable. So in that measurement plan, just make sure you have room to plan for that change. Monitoring, controlling. Just, again, reassessing regularly. Are we doing the right things that are driving towards that value? And then if we think we're not, and if we need to pivot, then adapt. And then really expand that stakeholder scope if it needs to be expanded. And be proactive in making these adjustments, and in making those adjustments is really owning, again, those outcomes. And it's not to say that, again, as what I stated earlier, you don't have to shoulder the burden alone, but knowing who can help make these adjustments, who can help own these outcomes as we're trying to reassess, and if we need to pivot, who can help us pivot on the strategy. And again, it's just always confirming those outcomes. Are we still driving towards these outcomes? Because again, many of our environments that we work in are dynamic. And then as we're trying to close out projects, is really tracking the value, the realized value. And then along the way, don't forget to capture the lessons learned, because these may be lessons that can be utilized for the next project, for the next team. And don't forget to anticipate, as we're wrapping up these projects, the impacts that may even unfold even after the project ends. Because this really turns it from getting out of the land of theory into the land of action. And it ensures projects just aren't a check mark, but they really are a contribution. So let's bring this home as we wrap up today's show. And I want to reinforce a few things. The M.O.R.E framework challenges us to go beyond the basics. And going beyond the basics, it requires us to manage perceptions, own outcomes, continuously improve by relentlessly reassessing, and to expand that perspective. Success is no longer about the big three. They're still part of the equation. They're not the sole reason for driving project success. Still very critical. It's about delivering value that stakeholders recognize and appreciate. So here's my challenge to you. On your next project, pick one letter of the M.O.R.E to focus on. Maybe it's managing perceptions more actively. Maybe it's owning the outcome beyond your task list, asking yourself, what more can I do? Maybe it's reassessing the value more often and implementing a reassessment plan as part of your overall governance model. Or maybe it's expanding your perspective to include social impact. Social impact meaning, sustainability, the key emerging trends. And why is this important to manage perceptions, own outcomes, relentlessly reassess and expand perspective? Because when we maximize project success, we are not just delivering projects. What we are doing as project professionals is we're elevating our organizations, we're elevating our communities, and that elevates the world around us. So thanks for listening to Project Management Masterclass. If you found today's episode insightful, share this with a colleague. Let's keep the momentum going. And remember, project success always first begins within. Until next time, keep striving for more.
Thanks for listening to the Project Management Masterclass. If you're ready to lead at a higher level, explore the Power Skills Academy and start mastering the skills that drive real project success. Visit www.developpowerskills.com. The link is in the description. See you in the next episode.